Welcome to Trinity Radio. I'm Braxton Hunter, and along with me is
Jonathan Pritchett.
And I am fresh back from Canada. Had a blast up there, and today we are going to be talking about why I am a really strange Gothic atheist. Stick with us.
Welcome to Trinity Radio with Dr. Braxton Hunter and Professor Jonathan Pritchett.
We're forgiven, we're shown mercy and grace, and our punishments probably aren't as harsh as they should be, even within this lifespan.
Do skeptics bring objections to the case? Of course they do.
What's going on with you today? They just don't like it. They don't like it that God is just and He has every right as creator to do what He wills.
God is the best explanation for the beginning of the universe.
Of now y'all having to look at our faces, which for that I apologize. So a video was sent to us by a friend on Facebook with this really creepy guy. He had long blonde hair, pale skin, red eyes.
Yeah.
Looked to be a man in his 40s, probably trying to cling to whatever sort of youthfulness he might have had at one point in his life.
Well, at the end of the video, you see him normal. So I think he really tried to like goth it up for this video.
He didn't look normal at the. Okay, unless you're Steve Gregg.
Don't have long hair.
Don't have long hair. You look. Don't have long scraggly hair like that. That's. Anyway, before you quote John 7:24, that's about situational appearances, not the way someone dresses. So, seriously, man, grow up.
Okay, so we are being a little bit snarky, and the video is linked in the
No, I'm being
comments,
serious. I'm like, this guy's, the way he looks at his age is
creepy.
It's
not the way he means
it's creepy. I mean, I guess it could be cool if you were like 17 in high school and you're going through a phase.
And he never moved past that, is your
right,
point.
he never moved past
You'll notice that sometimes we're a little more direct with, Western people that are pretty well like us, except atheists, and when they're particularly when their reasons like we think they probably know better. You know,
yeah,
we're a little more straightforward than we might be with like those Hindu kids that were really nice.
They were nice. This guy needs to get out of his mom's basement.
So the video is linked in the show notes or in the YouTube video comment or information section, and it be warned that there is some very strong language that this guy uses. He's apparently very emotional about what he's talking about, not like some of the other atheists we've had who are just kind of like matter of fact. This guy, he means it, and he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, and we'll talk about why, because he does get into that.
I have a chip on my shoulder too. Look at the way he carries himself.
It's very clear you have a chip on your shoulder.
Yes.
No one's confused.
Get a haircut
about it.
Get the red eye paint off your face, and get a job.
So we both watched this. I think it's kind of cool, though, that we're to the point now in the new season where people have figured out our new kind of format, and they're sending us video like, respond to this. Like, we want to know what you would say to this guy or this lady or whatever. And we actually have a backlog.
This was a guy, right?
We think, yes, this is a guy.
I wouldn't let my daughter dress like her.
You know, gender is supposed to be fluid these days, so who really knows? But I think he would think he's a guy. So we can jump right into this. There are a couple of things that I think should be mentioned from the jump. These are Braxton Hunter's principles of critiquing Christianity. All right, and there are two principles that you need to understand, or else you're going to crash the whole apparatus into a logic wall that you didn't intend to crash into. And there's two principles for this particular video. Principle one is people who want, because the video is basically talking, and we'll go through point by point. The video is basically talking about something that is kind of obliquely called the atrocities of the Old Testament. He's focusing primarily on God commanding killings, God commanding the killings of men, women, and children, cattle, donkeys. He even seems to be concerned about the donkeys, the sacrifice of Isaac. You know, these things that happen in the Old Testament that do cause you to raise your eyebrows and think, I would like to have an answer to why God commanded that. But we did a show similar to this last year, and I mentioned this then, but principle number one is, and we're going to see this played out as we look at what this fellow had to say. Principle number one that atheists need to understand when they criticize the Old Testament is from a Judeo-Christian perspective, death is not the end. That is very, very important for you to understand. If you think death is the end, then a lot of these things do seem a lot worse than they are in reality, but death isn't the end from our perspective, okay? I know that you think that death is the end, and I know you don't actually believe, as you made clear, that God exists or that Satan is real and all that, but the fact that you understand we think that death is not the end is important to how you analyze what we have to say, as we'll see as we move forward. And then principle two is judgment is actually a good thing. Some things that seem bad are actually good things, right, Dr. Pritchett? If we catch a person who has committed some sort of a crime here, he may not appreciate or like being in prison. If you are okay with the death penalty, he may not like being put to death. But the fact is, we consider that judgment, though horrible to experience and horrible even for the people involved to have to execute whatever judgment it is, that judgment itself is a good thing and a very helpful thing and perhaps a necessary thing. So death is not the end, principle one. Judgment is actually a good thing if it's the proper judgment. All right?
Yeah.
With those two principles, I think we're ready to move forward. But Dr. Pritchett, do you have anything other than commenting on this fellow's physical appearance, anything else you want to say about him?
Seriously, get a haircut. I mean, I like long hair.
Aside from his
I
physical
want
appearance.
long hair. People have seen pictures of me. I grow my hair out,
Don't you
but I
think
mean,
I'd
this
like to
guy
have-
has like.
Don't you think I'd like to have some long hair?
I know you would, and that's why one of
I
the
once
reasons why,
did, by the way. I don't
one
know
of the
if
reasons
you
why I
was
want to
that.
grow my hair out long, like Steve Gregg, is just to bug you.
So you can donate some of it to my cause? Is that what it is?
Yeah, but seriously, this guy, he's got this long, stringy, bleachy blonde hair with his bleachy blonde makeup and his red eyes and his Gothic
It's
outfit.
like a Marilyn Manson look.
And I can't get past it. It's like when you speak, I can't take you seriously when you're trying to be creepy guy.
Yeah.
But in addition to your 2 points, I do want to add also that sometimes we think certain judgments are harsh, but they always conveniently forget what was going on that led God to have such a
Sure.
sin has consequences and severe ones. And when you look at how horribly wicked these people are, it's not some ongoing mandate of Yahweh for us to go for Jews and Christians in perpetuity to conquer people.
Yes, that will
These
come
are-
up too.
These are very contextualized events in the early history of a nation.
Yes, we could add a third principle,
Yeah.
though. Not the two principles I add are because each of his things pretty well presuppose that death is the end and that judgment might not be a good thing.
Yeah.
But we could add a third principle, which is what you said, that not everything that anyone in the Bible does is God telling us do what He did. Right?
It's not all
You
go
know?
and do likewise.
Yeah, right. I mean,
It's not like in Islam where there's just this open mandate to continue on jihad. These were very specific events that are specific to a people
mhm.
long ago. And I'm sorry that modern sensibilities don't like ancient warfare and ancient war rhetoric, but that's a problem with your sensibilities. It's not really a problem with anything that actually happened and why God executed that judgment in history.
But the reason I think these principles need to be mentioned up front is because, and we saw this last year in a similar video, but what people want to do, like we get, don't misunderstand, we get that he doesn't give his name, blonde
Creepy
Marilyn
guy.
Manson.
Yes.
We get that what you have an issue with Christianity, you don't believe that God exists, you don't believe in Satan, you made that very clear, you said that, we understand that. However, if you're going to look at our worldview and suppose that God is real and then try to determine whether or not He's acting justly or commanding just things, you've got to take the whole ball of wax into consideration. In last year's episode on this issue, I said you've got to put on all the clothes of our worldview, but I come up with an analogy that I think is pretty good. Imagine that I disconnected the cockpit of a 747 and then pointed out that planes obviously can't fly because I've been watching this cockpit for hours and it has never flown. And in fact, we can look at the cockpit and see that it doesn't have wings. It doesn't have an engine. Therefore, 747s don't fly. Okay, you'd say, wait a minute. The cockpit is just one section of the 747. You need the whole thing in order to judge whether or not it can fly. In the same way, you can't isolate part of the biblical story and say, look, God is ordering Israel to kill people. Obviously, God is evil or self-contradictory. Wait a minute, you're looking just at only the cockpit and saying it doesn't fly, right? If you're going to assess the biblical picture of God, you need to look at the whole ball of wax. For our purposes here, you need to include in your conclusion, God is maximally just and therefore has the right to execute judgment on those who have violated his law. And then death is not the end of human existence. Now, with the whole plane in place, you're ready to test whether it can fly. But isolating a piece of the story is akin to pointing out a severed cockpit and declaring 747s don't fly.
Right. And
pretty good, huh? I thought that was
I
pretty
like
good.
that analogy. Yeah. You gotta look at it from within the worldview perspective. I'd also like to add that on his worldview, he has no foundation or ontology to make a judgment about Yahweh's character one way or the other, given that he's an atheist.
Right.
And we've talked about that plenty of
Ad
times.
nauseum.
So, but this video, for me, I thought it was rather pedestrian. And then, of course, with the hair and makeup and Gothic look of the whole thing, I can't take it seriously. This is not a serious challenge to the
Well,
faith.
it's somewhat like the like if a Christian said to an evolutionary biologist, well, how come there's still monkeys that haven't turned into humans yet?
Yeah, first,
Therefore, evolution is false.
first
right?
he starts with a really, it's like the really hyper Arminian guy who says, "Your God is Satan." I mean, that's basically what he starts
That is exactly
with.
what he
Right, so
says.
he sounds like one of those crazy Arminians that
Right.
I can't worship your God of Calvinism is actually Satan. You know,
Yeah,
But
yeah.
right there, my whole okay, this guy's a joke. You know,
Right.
that as if there's not distinctions within the text that he didn't bother to read more carefully between those two people. Number one, God, Satan primarily is a deceiver. God's not deceiving. He's saying, if you do this, these are the consequences.
Right.
And lo and behold, when
He's
they
right.
behave a certain way, they get the consequences. He's not deceiving anybody.
So let's
Um,
consider some of the things that were brought up. The first thing that he mentions is the killing of the firstborn son in Egypt. And he says,
Yeah.
look, this is something that God wanted to happen. This is awful. And he even says this is, he uses an expletive, this is effing crazy or something like
Yeah.
that. Okay, remember our two principles. Death is not the end, and judgment is actually a good thing, right?
Right.
Okay, was this an act of judgment?
Yes.
Why, yes, it was. Is God a maximally just being as Christians conceive of him? Yes, he is. Therefore, he can enact this justice, right? Or command this justice to be done, this judgment. Okay, well, but what about the fact that these are firstborn sons, and in some cases, perhaps young, and that's not fair. They didn't do anything wrong. Well, in actuality, you're right. If death were the end, but remember principle number one, death is not the end in our perspective. Right. And these children would have likely grown up in this pagan culture and worshipped false gods and all that sort of thing. And now guess what? They're going to be everlastingly in the arms of the Savior. So on your worldview, positing just the cockpit, that God exists and ordered this, yeah, the plane doesn't fly. But if on the other hand, you understand that God is just and there's judgment and death is not the end.
Now, let's be fair though. Because there are Christians who don't believe what you just said about every single innocent child that dies in, below a certain age. Not everyone believes that they're all going to heaven.
Oh, you're saying there are Christian perspectives.
Right.
Like some extreme forms of Calvinism that would say, no, just as...
well, there's probably Arminians.
There are elect and non-elect children, or... Well, for that to be true, you'd have to be saying that there are some Arminians that think all babies are going to go to hell. Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm just saying I've met Arminians who don't take a dogmatic stance and would say,
I just say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got guys like Jerry Walls who say it's quite possible that there is postmortem evangelism and that these babies ultimately have to make a decision one way or the other, here or in the hereafter. But the bottom line is... It still goes back to death isn't the end.
Yeah.
And so
what is the ultimate character of God who offers mercy? So I believe that now at the same time though, we cannot forget that corporately Egypt was deserving of punishment. And that is a punishment. It is a harsh punishment.
Right.
So what? That doesn't make it unjust. It means you don't like it.
Right. What
You
it
know?
means is it looks bad, so God's evil. No, it looks bad, and to experience it would have felt bad, but it's a just judgment, which actually makes it a good. And everyone watching this thinks so. If you think any criminal should ever be punished for anything, or incarcerated for anything, or
Yeah.
get any kind of judgment from the state, then we're just talking about degrees of punishment
Right.
and
Well,
justice.
and does it become less just because the adults were punished for by having their young people, the firstborn, taken from them?
Okay, if a man is a child molester, for example, and I take his child away from him to a different house, am I doing something unjust to the child, or am I actually benefiting the child? I'm benefiting the child.
And in the
right?
same way,
In the same way, if death is the end, oh yeah, you're right. That would be completely unjust, or at least it would seem to be completely unjust to kill that kid just to punish the parent. But if death is not the end, then what we have is more akin to he's doing some horribly destructive things by violating God's law, so we're going to take that kid away from him to another place. The best of all places, the presence
Right.
of God, right?
right.
The best of all foster parents, right? So I think again, these two principles kind of
Yeah,
work.
and I don't want to minimize that the severity of the punishment. Yeah, it's shocking. God killed the firstborn of every person in Egypt that didn't have the blood over the door.
Right.
Yes, behave yourself. That's what he's trying to tell you.
Right.
Repent, behave yourself. You
Yeah.
know, punishment is severe and swift on the wicked, and that's just, it's like I say in our opening credits every time. People just don't like it that God has absolute right to judge however He wills to judge,
Right.
and
They just don't like it. They don't like it that God is just.
Right.
And he has every right to. I've heard it so many times.
right. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah. See, on other podcasts, people skip the intro. You
Oh,
cannot
yeah.
skip honey. You just can't
Yeah.
do it.
Everybody loves honey.
Yeah. And then they turn off when we start talking. Who's trying to
So
get the thing
that, to me, those two principles help
Yeah.
us with the killing of the firstborn son. Now, you may disagree, and you may still have an emotional reaction. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? I still have an emotional reaction, but your emotional reaction does not a logical criticism make.
Yeah.
What we've said makes perfectly fine sense, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Now, with the next thing you brought up was Abraham, right? Abraham.
No,
and
the next thing you brought up was God's decision to destroy man and beast in the flood.
Okay, so he's not getting the order right anyway.
Right. Well, okay,
Just
sure.
randomly-
But
he's not going in sequential order.
right,
That's fine.
these were horrible people. I also disagree with some theological positions that try to say this is the way everyone is. That the thoughts of man's heart are only evil continually and all that sort of thing. These were a specific group of people in the history of the world who were so horrible that God decided to destroy the world with water, save one family. These are pretty bad people. Right?
Yeah.
So you have this judgment. Well, but there were kids, and this was actually the specific thing we addressed last year when someone wrote in.
Yeah.
But yes, you're right. There were kids, but again, death is not the end. Okay, but it might have been painful in that case, and that sort of thing. Well, yeah, people experience pain even if they live. That's just a part of life. That's part of having a coherent system in a world that makes sense and works and all of that in a
Right.
fallen world. So yeah, people are going to experience pain and suffering, but kids, in the flood that died, death is not the end. And as for the adults, it's a judgment, and God is a maximally great judge who has the freedom to judge if he wants to judge. And by the way, he's the perfect of all judges because he has all of the facts at his disposal, because Christianity posits that he is omniscient in addition to being all-powerful and all-loving. So this is,
Right.
again, you can't just take
So-
the cockpit.
So Marilyn, is that what we're calling this guy? So-
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So Marilyn, no, he's not. Because that's your mom's name. We're not going to call him Marilyn.
Well, thank you.
Um,
What was the other guy in Marilyn Manson who was like the blonde bass Twiggy?
Twiggy.
We'll call him Twiggy.
Okay, so Twiggy here, he does not have the base of knowledge to make the judgment against God, whether God is just in doing that or not.
Right.
So despite not having an ontology to make the claim in the first place, he also he doesn't have the correct perspective to adjudicate that particular instance or any of these instances.
Or a foundation for justice.
Right, no ontological basis to make the claim in the first place that it's wicked. But even if you could justify an objective moral system absent God, which no one has been able to do, not even the guy who posts dissertations in our comment sections has been able to do. Justin, right?
Yeah, Jimmy.
Yeah. Okay. So this Twiggy guy is down on two counts. He hasn't really thought this through. This is the problem with the Hitchens rant.
Mm-hmm.
You've never thought through what your argument is. You're just flinging manure and thinking that you're making a point. Then he whines about the donkeys, And so when I was eating, chicken while I watched the video you sent me, and I'm thinking, okay.
Yeah. So this guy must be a vegan if he's upset about animals dying, right?
Man, those donkeys.
And even if he is a vegan, where do you draw the line? Plant death? I mean, what do you?
Right.
What was the end game here?
Just if you're going to be a vegan for whatever you like vegan food, but don't bring in
not for philosophical reasons.
No, or
maybe we'll do a show why I'm a vegan. Sometime.
Moral objection to my eating a cheeseburger.
But so again, the two principles we brought up handle that issue. What about the sacrifice of Isaac? And he even says here, and this is where you really do. I'm sorry, I don't want to be unkind to you. He does.
Yes,
but
very much so.
But what I do want to say,
no, it's the look at me. I make my video,
right,
and I'm going to make.
He made a video, and he said, "Here you go."
People are unkind to me all the time. I still get up every day, and it's fine.
Well, I don't want to be unkind to you, Terrence, but you made a horrible mistake by saying that the sacrifice of Isaac is something that Christian parents are supposed to say to their kids. Now, you do this likewise. I mean, he does flat out say, this is a model example for how Christians are supposed to act today. What?
Where in the world is that?
What do you, what in the world? Like, this is like saying, okay, look, Noah built an ark. That's in the Bible. Now Christians are all supposed to build arks. Right? Is that what we're doing here?
Yeah.
Or even evil things. Like Eve ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now everyone's supposed to eat of the tree of knowledge. If they can, they need to find it and eat. What are we doing here? No, because something in the Bible doesn't mean, what sort of a hermeneutic gets you to the position that anything mentioned in the Bible is something you're supposed to do?
Crazy person. I'm telling you, it has to do with the fact that he's malnutrition from not eating meat or dairy, and his brain's just not working. I'm sorry. If you're going to do the look at me thing and you're going to look like that, I'm not going to take you seriously.
Well, sometimes it's okay to speak back with a little force because it's really, there's a third party viewing this, and they need to know that this. I mean, Tony's position is just absent of any serious thought about how to understand literature.
Right, and the way the whole goth thing, I can't get past it. I'm sorry. I know that.
Do they still call it goth?
I don't know what they call it. This guy needs to cut his hair off because he doesn't even have he has women's hair for long.
Okay,
and I'm just.
It looks like he's conditioned.
I can't get past this because he wants us to take him seriously. And I'm sorry, dress the part if you want to be taken seriously.
Well, he wanted to make an impression, and he certainly did that.
Yeah, but I know there's some Christians out there saying, "Yeah, I've got tattoos too. I want to grow my hair long." It's not about that.
It's not about that.
It's okay, but draw the line at the weird makeup and the. I mean,
well, it's like Benjamin Franklin thought about these things. He said, "No, fashion, whatever your time is, the fashions of that day, that's fine. Pay attention to that. Just don't let it overcome you, right?
Right.
But let's take his words seriously. Do pay attention to that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, dress the part if you want to lecture Christians, because I was we've seen the pictures you've thrown up.
You bring
on
it up
screen
every chance you get.
That I was in music and
you
all
were
that
a
stuff,
famous rock star
and hip hop artist and all of that, right? And there's pictures of me but seriously, what did I do?
I had long hair.
Yeah,
Nobody ever talks about my rock band. I had a rock band. We were called Today's Special. We had 3 gigs.
And
I had long hair.
That's why no one ever talks about it.
Well, there's a few people out there that could see this video who know about it.
Yeah.
But anyway,
that they won't should also tell you something.
Well, I went to music business school before I went to seminary because I realized I won't ever be Bono, but I can make money off of someone who will.
But here's what I realized. I cut my hair off. I had long hair the day before I moved to Evansville to come work for you.
Why are we talking about this?
Because I knew, because you, look.
Because it's an atrocity?
No, well, my hair was a little bit ratty and needed to be cut anyway. But no, it's just, I'm coming in, I'm new to the job, and I need to make an impression, and I'm about to teach
And you cut your
students,
hair, was the
and
point.
I cut my hair.
You wanted to look respectable.
Because I wanted people to take me seriously as their professor, especially because I'm actually a friend.
You're serious. You're a serious
and
scholar.
This much younger than our typical students. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, some guy in his early 50s is going to be looking at me with that. No. So my point is first, if you present yourself the way this person, and this is important, we need to talk about this. This is a life lesson here. First of all, if you present yourself like a joke, like this guy does, and then you compound that with bad arguments, you get people like me on Trinity Radio making fun of every single thing
you
do.
asked for this, is what you're saying.
Right. So in the video, he has a picture of the dad with the kids, you know, trying to make his implication that you go and do these very same things, and this makes horrible things all over the world.
Yeah.
And my thing is, think for a second that this typical dad is the guy that you want to convince. Okay? Do you think a guy like you is going to convince a guy like him?
Yeah,
that
that's a
you're
good
right?
point.
You know, so that's all I'm saying.
He's going to make fun of you with more dad-like jokes than we would give.
Yeah, so I just don't understand the overall purpose of this video.
Plus, why is this kid playing on the floor instead of having been sacrificed on Mount Moriah?
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a good point. I can't follow anything about this video at all.
Right. Well, and when it comes to the story of Abraham and sacrificing Isaac,
did Abraham do it?
right? The reader is privy to information that Abraham was not even privy to.
Right.
Which is that God is going to provide another way. Although Abraham does seem to, Abraham trusts God. Abraham knows, I mean, follow the story, man.
Yeah.
Abraham knows this son is going to be the child of promise, you know, and that this great covenant is going to be born out through Isaac. And I'm sure that Abraham is thinking, this is the most strange thing in the world, but God wants me to do it. I trust him. And what does he tell the servants when he goes up on the mountain? We will return you. We're going to go up there. We're going to sacrifice. We will return to you. We both of us are going to come back down. And so he trusted God. But the point of the story, like, no one ever reads this story and thinks I should sacrifice my kid, because guess what? No kid gets sacrificed.
Right.
And it's to illustrate something, and it's
God's
a type
kid.
of the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus,
Yeah.
and in the same region, and all those kind of things. But the thing is, later on, he comes back and says, "This is a God who demands child sacrifice." No, it's not.
Right.
Molech was a god, and you look like one of his worshipers, frankly. But Molech was a god who divided. So this never even shows up in the story. What you're saying, God did.
Yeah.
So, did you have something you wanted to say?
Just look, I remember the Bible program. I don't know if you saw the Bible program.
I did watch some of it.
Okay. I do remember sitting there with my son Noah, and that scene, I think that's where he got it, where Abraham was about to plunge the knife into Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have read that story to Noah before.
Mm-hmm.
But watching it, yeah, it really did do a number on him. He was like, that's just crazy. And he almost started tearing up, like, what is going on here? And he knew the story.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew that Isaac, wasn't going to be put to death.
Right.
But there is something about that visual that is powerful.
Well, it's intended to be.
Right.
Like, what does God say to Abraham? He says, take your son, your only son, who you love. It's like he's twisting the knife. Although some common, I teach a thing on Genesis, and I went through this, and some commentators think that no, actually, he's actually trying to show his sympathy with Abraham.
Yeah.
One commentator went so far as to say that because of what God was commanding, even though God knew he wasn't going to let it be carried forth, if Abraham had said, I can't do this, that he wouldn't have been, like, God wouldn't have counted it as disobedience to him. Now, I don't know. That's one commentator's guess, at this. But the bottom line is, most scholars see this as almost like a divine plea that is uncommon with God. It's almost like he's really going out of his way to show his sympathies with Abraham, even in the midst of what he knows is going to be.
That this is why the faith of Abraham is held in such high regard, because no matter what happened before he went up that mountain. He knew that it was going to be okay and that God was still going to deliver on his promises through Isaac.
Right.
So
If
it's a story about
if
faith.
I kill him,
you know?
God must be going to resurrect him.
Right. And guess
Right.
what? God did raise Jesus from the dead. So
Right. Gordon Wenham says, salvation is thus promised in the very decree that sounds like annihilation. In all of these ways, we see God's faithful tenderness cushioning the startling harshness of God's command. It's as though God is saying to Abraham, I'm testing your obedience and allegiance. You don't understand, but in light of all I've done and said to you, trust me, not even death can nullify the promise.
Right, because what's principle number 1?
Death is not the end.
There you go.
Right? So you see, again, these things coming back together. All right, the next thing he mentions is 1 Samuel 15:3. Now, as so common with people who want to criticize the consistency of the Bible or the morality of the Bible, he only quotes one verse. The verse that he quotes is 1 Samuel 15:3, which says, now go and strike Amalek and devote to destruction all that they have done. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. Okay, sounds harsh, and it is harsh. I mean, you know, this is the kind of thing that even church folks look at and they're like, yeah, I mean, don't worry, we're not trying to whitewash it and say this is Disney World here in the Bible. I mean, we're saying this is harsh. The question is it duly harsh? Is there good reason for this, and is there a way God can still be merciful in light of all these things?
Now what we're doing is what Greg Boyd calls the best spin. This is what I'm reading Crucifixion of the Warrior out right now. Been reading it forever because it's long, but it's good. But I don't agree with his premise. But he's saying, well, aren't you just trying to put the best spin on this? Isn't there another way? And maybe people offer like Boyd's cruciform hermeneutic where, well, we need to read these things through the lens of Christ and understand that God has allowed himself to be depicted in this way, but it's not really what God is like and all of that. God is really like Jesus. So could somebody accuse us of saying, look, you're just trying to put the best spin on it?
Not with these cases. There's a case that Paul Copan goes into in his Is God a Mortal Monster, in which I don't know if I should really talk about it because it gets a little bit explicit, but it has something to do with the way you read it. The word that is used for cutting off your hand may mean to cut off your hand, or it might mean to shave a portion of your body, a very sensitive portion of your body. Maybe it can go either way, and so Paul Copan goes with that, I think, if I'm remembering it properly. And I remember when I read it, I thought, okay, you're admitting that you're maybe stretching it here, and I think a case like that is we're trying to put the best spin on it. But if God says, in these cases, God tells us what his intentions are, and we know that he's ultimately just. These are just, the examples he picked are great examples for actually illustrating God's justice. This one, no less. This Amalek, I said he only reads 1 Samuel 15:3, which is the one where it says God says go kill anything. Well, why? You know, a good reader will want to know, why did God say to kill these people? Well, start from 1 Samuel 15:1 and not 15:3. 15:1, it says, and Samuel said to Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people. Now therefore listen to the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I have noted what Amalek did to Israel in opposing them on the way when they came out of Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek, and then you get verse 3 where it says go kill the men, women, children, infants, the whole horrible thing. Well, what is that referencing back to? Well, it's referencing back to Exodus chapter 17 and verse 8, which says, then Amalek came and fought against Israel at Rephidim. So Amalek is guilty of a war crime against Israel. I'm not trying to put gravy on it and exaggerate it. That's what it was. It was a war crime against Israel. And then in Exodus 17:14, God says, write this in a book as a memorial and to recite it to Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. So God, the ultimate judge, right? He's maximally just. He is the ultimate judge, and he's executing a judgment. It wasn't like a crime of passion on God's part or in any way arbitrary. Way long before in Exodus, he said, one day the sentence for this is going to be that they're going to get wiped out. So then when we get to 1 Samuel 15, he says, it's time for that sentence. Yep. It's a just judgment against war criminals. The very same people are the same kind of people who would definitely want Hitler killed, right? Yeah. This is a war crime, and as far as the infants and the children and the women are concerned that die, death is not the end. And if, and at least with the infants and the children, God can bring justice to the abused and to the abuser. All right, so again, perfect example. I don't think we're putting spin on it. I think we're looking at what God says, taking into account the characteristics we know about God, that he's just judge, all-knowing, and it just falls right in place. Or you want to be an anarchist who doesn't think we should ever judge anybody for anything or put anybody in prison for anything.
Right, and that's what I'm wondering. He says this belief in this God who doesn't exist and the belief in Satan who doesn't exist is all the ills of the world. Okay, so that goes away. You still have human beings.
Right.
What kind of utopia do you think you can replace outside of religious belief of any kind? We saw that in the 20th century, trying to have, from the Enlightenment forward, trying to have the utopia, and it resulted in the single century in all of human history where the most killed ever.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah. So really, what we're asking for here with Torquay is we're talking about there's going to be judgments one way or the other.
Yeah.
The question is, do you want a divine judge who's all-knowing and all-loving and all-merciful and can see all and can make sure it all works out the right way, a maximally great judge? Or do you want some guy? Do you want Donald Trump? This is basically what we're just trying to decide here.
Yeah, remember, Donald Trump got elected president, so, I don't think you probably like him that much either.
Right.
But be careful what you wish for.
Right.
God not only exists, he may answer your prayers, and then we end up with another 20th century and just...
Right.
Because we've seen the fruit of atheist regimes and irreligion, and it was a disaster, and we don't want to go back to that. You had your shot,
Okay, so then he fires off several rounds he claims that the Bible's filled with sexism and homophobia, and even though I think we know the kind of things that he's referring to, he doesn't give us examples, so we can't really respond.
Yeah.
However, let me just comment on homophobia. Homophobia means the fear of homosexuals or homosexuality. God is not afraid of homosexuals or homosexuality. I am not afraid of homosexual people or homosexuality. I've got close friends from my past who have struggled with same-sex attraction, at least one who is living out a homosexual lifestyle. I'm not afraid. I've gone to dinner with him. He's been at my house, stayed at my house, all these kinds of things. That's not what's going on here. However, if there is a God, right, because you're trying to find out, is this internally consistent? If there is a God, if you're positing that much to examine it, and he is just, and he has a design that he intends for procreation, also as an image of his relationship with the church later on and all that sort of thing, it's up to him to decide whether that's a part of his plan or not. Okay, that's not homophobia. Now, you may not like it, and we could have an interesting discussion about that, and I have great sympathies with, and I love my homosexual friends, and I think that in many cases the church has mistreated them. I'm willing to say that. However, that doesn't mean we're homophobic, right? That's a different category.
And Christians behaving poorly towards a people group in the past doesn't
make their sins okay.
Right. It doesn't address the question of, is it right or wrong in the eyes of a holy God? Mm-hmm. And that's a different question.
Now, people are going to watch this, and Terrence may watch this and roll his eyes and say, homosexuality is a sin? Oh my gosh, listen to these people. Well, yeah, okay, listen to these people. You need to take what we're saying seriously and not brush it off. You need to try to present something logical. Yes. Something that is structured, that might actually convince someone more than the YouTube atheists who are already going to be convinced by what you're saying. Yeah. So, what are you going to say?
Well, no, it's just he probably, it would have been better had he said bigot as opposed to homophobic.
Yeah.
At least get your word, because homophobic is the wrong word. How God homophobic, or ancient Jews that doesn't even. Anyway,
it also tells me you're completely. You say you had a Christian upbringing, and so I'm presuming that you have relationships of some sort still with people like us. It just shows me that even given all of that, you are so out of touch with how church people actually think.
I'm sorry you grew up a homophobe.
Yeah.
And you're trying to deal with that.
Don't project that onto us.
Right. Don't blame that on us.
We love gay people. God loves gay people.
Right. Wants them to be saved and stop living in sin. That's,
Okay, he criticizes God for
Wants straight people to stop living in sin too. It has
Sure.
nothing to do with,
sure.
we're not singling that out.
No, and we
You
always
made it
get
an
criticized.
issue. Yeah.
We've always get, please. We've got multiple episodes where we talk about that whole thing,
Yeah.
and I think you'll find it to be a very sober-minded approach to this whole thing.
Right.
You know?
But he made it an issue. Christians
Right.
aren't.
Why are you so obsessed with that issue?
Right. What
Okay.
What baggage do you have?
He criticizes God for animal sacrifice, human sacrifice, and the killing of children. Okay, first of all, human sacrifice and the killing of children. Okay, you're thinking of Isaac because that's what you brought up. The only real example of some sort of a human sacrifice would be Jesus on the cross, and that would require a whole lot more, basis for understanding. God is not a God of child sacrifice. Okay, that is not that is Molech. Again, the guy that you dressed up for today. So the killing of children, human sacrifice, animal sacrifice. Okay, what are you getting at here? Is it just this is again? It's like an impressionistic argument.
Man, you have no idea. It's about to be fire pit season. How many animals I'm going
Right.
to sacrifice over my
Right.
fire pit?
And him too. I don't believe him. I think he
Right.
eats animals.
Right.
But
No, he's a vegan. Remember?
well, he didn't say he was a vegan.
And we have
did he?
no idea if he's a vegan.
Yeah.
I'm not a vegan, and and there many of the animals are going to be sacrificed to my fire pit.
but to your stomach.
Yeah,
But
it's going to be good.
The thing.
It's not religious though.
Right, but the thing
I'm just
about it
eating.
is,
It's called dinner.
he's trying to be, and this we see a lot with YouTube atheists and with Hitchens type people, and I really want you all to get this. It's an impressionistic type of non-argument where he's just saying animal sacrifice. It's like, yeah, what? What about animal? What's the problem? Well, just, animal sacrifice. That's not an argument. That's you just being disgusted at something because of the very provincial, narrow-minded 21st century world in which you live. Judaism, before the destruction of the temple, was a religion of animal sacrifice. Get over it.
Yeah.
Sorry, we could talk about why God did that, and really ultimately how that pictured something, and how the things that they could and couldn't eat all had to do with the divisions that they're
And how
supposed to
just
make
about
from
every
people
bit of
in
the
culture.
animal was used too.
Yeah. So but you can't just, and like with a lot of the homosexuality, animal sacrifice. Okay, you're just saying words. Like,
Right.
what's your argument?
Right.
Okay, so okay.
I mean, he doesn't have an argument. These are just buzzwords to people who already agree with him.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Your YouTube atheist crowd.
Right. But so you're ranting because you're not really making an argument, and you're not doing anything that will convince anyone who disagrees with you to come agree with you.
Right. So he criticizes Christian parents for teaching that the Bible
It's like
is
me
true.
saying goth and get a haircut and
Yeah.
that stuff. No, you didn't
And
hear.
you did do that.
Right, and
but you did give an argument. Look respectable if you're trying to convince
Right.
respectable people.
Right. But even at the end of the day, nobody heard that. Nobody heard me picking on this guy for
Right.
not dressing appropriately for the occasion and not acting his age.
Yeah.
But I get it. But still,
Try to have some substance.
what is the goal here? At least like with the Hindu people have a goal. Come check out Hinduism.
Yeah.
Because of this, and this.
Well, he does give us his goal. His goal, he criticizes Christian parents for teaching that the Bible is true, and if they don't worship God, they'll go to hell. And he calls this mental child abuse and asks, should we allow it? Like, presumably, should it be legal? Which we also did a show on that. That was the episode where Pritchett Prime was born.
Yeah.
But okay, so we got free speech issues here. But, look, that just begs the question of whether we're talking about something real here with hell and all these things in the Bible. Right, you don't think they're real. But if they are real, what you're doing is incredibly lackadaisical towards some very serious
Very abusive.
issues.
You're sitting.
That's very abusive, yeah. So you're just begging the question of whether or not it's real. Like, I used to, because my father had health issues and stuff. He had a bleeder's disease.
Yeah.
Still does. When I was young, like younger than most people thought about these things, I was all the time worried that my dad was going to die of blood disease. I was also worried about my own physical health and about cancer and stuff like that. Someone might say, that's horrible that your parents led you to believe in cancer. That is child abuse. Well, not if cancer is real, right?
Yeah.
That's a facet of reality, and it's perfectly reasonable
Right.
to inform children of it.
But let's also, I teach every night. Teach my kids. We have Bible time.
Yeah.
I know that you do.
Yeah.
Y'all are way more creative because y'all do big scrolls and stuff, which you probably need to make videos for.
Yeah.
You know how much we talk about hell? About as much as the Bible
About
does.
as much as the Bible's going to
You
say.
know how much the Bible talks about hell?
Well, Jesus talked about it 4 times.
Yeah. And that's more than anyone else in the Bible.
Right.
But it was really only 4 times. You just get it in the parallels.
Yeah. If you count up all the parallels, it's 4 times.
Yeah. We do talk about hell, and there are various beliefs about hell. But hell doesn't loom. Read the book of Acts. How often is hell mentioned in the book of Acts? And the preaching of the gospel.
Yeah, it's not mentioned. Well, judgment and stuff like that is occasionally mentioned.
Right, but hell. It doesn't loom over all Christian discourse.
Right.
Now, in some circles it does.
We're not that one-dimensional.
Right.
It is a dimension
Yeah.
that needs to be discussed, but
Right.
we're not so
I don't tell
fixated.
my kids, you need to live like a Christian because you'll go to hell if you don't. Number one, they need to believe the gospel, right? And because they
The
believe
gospel
in
is not just about becoming born
Right.
again.
and then you live for God
Yeah.
in sanctification.
It's about being a part of a kingdom.
Yes, and
serving a
growing to
king.
be more human,
Yeah.
right? And so that's what I talk to my kids about. I don't say, you better go clean your room.
Yeah, it is somewhat like a 1920s backwoods you better eat your dinner or else you're gonna roast it. It's kind of you better listen to your mommy and daddy or else the devil's gonna drag you off.
See,
It's ridiculous. There are like you said.
if I can channel my inner Sartre, hell is basically this video because listening to this guy.
It does kind of look like the programming in hell.
Right. That would be hell to listen to
Yeah.
this guy talk and give bad arguments. But I just do not find, in my Christian experience, terrified kids filling children's church.
Well, honestly,
I don't find terrified kids filling Wednesday night game night at church.
No.
You just don't see this idea of mental abuse. Are you serious? These kids in church are typically happier.
You're
than
right.
that,
You don't see that a lot.
Where is all this?
However,
abuse
I don't.
taking place?
I'll give him this much. I don't think he's alone in being a kid. When he was a kid, he's worried about hell. The thing is, it all does come back down to whether it's real or not. If it's real, then you know what we do. We do that with what we do with cancer. Like if a kid's worrying all the time that he's going to get cancer,
Yeah.
we don't tell him, okay, that's obviously cancer's not real. No, that's lying. What you
Right.
do is you say, you seem to have an irrational fear of cancer.
Yeah.
And we say to our kids, if they're stuck on hell, you seem to have an irrational fear of hell.
Right.
If you trust God, if you have committed your life to Him, the promise is everlasting life, and you don't need to worry about hell anymore.
Yeah, it's not a thing for
Yeah.
you. Besides, I don't ever recall discussing hell in that context. I don't see it as mental abuse. You know what's mental abuse? You know what my daughter would call mental abuse? If you don't clean your room, I'm taking your cell phone.
Yeah, right.
That's more traumatizing to
Yeah.
my daughter to lose her cell phone over something than if you don't follow this religion or believe in Jesus, you'll go to hell.
Right.
So, I mean, this guy's notion of mental child abuse is so far detached from reality that I think whatever mind conjures up these ideas about it being abuse, whether it's him or Richard Dawkins or whoever's making these ridiculous claims.
Yeah. And so
How's your parenting?
go check out for a whole show on that. Go check out our episode on the audio version of the podcast on transhumanism and spiritual child abuse, and you'll get all you want on that. Last thing, he asks the viewer to help create a world where children are taught that they are beautiful, free beings with infinite potential. Now, okay,
That's exactly what my kids learn
Okay.
at church.
yeah, right. In fact, that's the only place you can get that.
Right.
Because the thing is, beautiful. Okay, well, beauty is just an innovation of human beings. Unless there is a God, is back to the argument from beauty. These are some theistic arguments you might want to study. The argument from beauty is the idea that things are beautiful and other things are not beautiful because there is a standard for
Like his
beauty and
clothing and
ugliness and
makeup.
all that kind of yeah
Is
yeah
not
that is
beautiful.
object. This is really going out on a limb, and you had to convince me of this years ago, but I will go out on a limb and say that is objectively not beautiful.
Right.
What
This-
Twiggy looked like there.
right, in the video.
But you want them to be beautiful. Well, you only get things like beauty, value statements if there's a God.
Right.
Free? Well, if you're right and there is no God and no Satan, then guess what? That means that we live in a closed system of cause and effect because you don't seem like the type of person that wants to posit some kind of, non-naturalist spiritual realities and things. So if there's no God and it's materialism and the universe is a closed system of cause and effect, determinism is true.
Yeah, you
and
have no
if
freedom.
determinism is true, you are the least free of any
Right.
worldview, right?
Right.
Okay, and then beings with infinite potential. No, the very concept of you dying and that being the end means it's extremely finite potential.
Right.
You know, so you want infinite potential? Well, infinite everlasting. We can give you everlasting potential. How about that?
Right.
We can offer you that, but all those things, I'm sorry, Twiggy, you don't get those from no God and no Satan and no supernatural. You get that from biblical Christianity.
Right. Your worldview gives you nothing that you want.
So to bring it all back around, the
Oh, but
principles-
your worldview did already give us the 20th century, thank you, and we're done with that.
yeah, we think the death is too much.
Yeah, gulag, not so much free, right?
But principles for this show: death is not the end. Judgment is actually a good thing if carried out by a worthy judge. And one last thing on that, like I'm not pacifistic, but I'm leaning more toward something nonviolent like
War
that.
is bad. Yeah, I agree.
Well, because the thing about it is, like when Moses or Joshua brought some kind of a military attack, they had the most perfect commander telling them to do that. God
Yeah.
himself, who's completely omniscient. When some modern leader says, well, I prayed about it. Well, okay, but I don't think you heard God's voice like they did.
Right.
So I don't have the confidence in you today that I had in God. But you're asking me to have more confidence in modern rulers than I had in God. It doesn't
Yeah.
work.
And again, those instances that he referred to are not everlasting mandates to go and do likewise. Those are
Absolutely. I don't even know where that came up with.
Right. They're highly
Who came up with that?
contextualized events in the history of one particular nation for their survival, by the way.
Okay, last thing that we want to mention to you, please don't go away. Don't turn off your phone or whatever, because I know that some of you click off when we start talking about Trinity and all that. But what I want to tell you is first is for the first time ever, and we may do another little video and talk about the Patreon account, but we have made a Patreon account, and you can now, if you so choose, we've never done this before, it's not what we're about, but you can now financially give to the show and support the show. Why are we doing this? Is it because we are televangelists? No. He has the hair for it, but I don't. I'm not a televangelist. Even when I go to churches, I don't ask for money. If they don't pay me, I don't get paid. The reason we're doing this is, number one, we have had people over the past year, I'd say, ask us, is there a way we can give to Trinity Radio? Like, we love Trinity, we love your evangelistic ministry, but is there a way I can give to Trinity Radio? Well, so we wanted to offer a way for people to give to Trinity Radio. Another thing is, we want to make this show bigger and better, and now I think we have more of a direction and a purpose than we've ever had before in the history of the show. We would like to be able to respond to more videos, and hopefully more people will hear the gospel. When we make one of these shows this season, we take that video and put it in the YouTube comments, if we can, of the person whose video we're responding to. And every single episode so far this year has resulted in comments on our page, on our YouTube channel, on the old internet box machine, and I have been evangelizing those people and sharing the gospel with them, and so we see this as a positive, beneficial thing and a resource going forward. If you don't give, that's fine. If you do want to give, then we have a way for you to do that now, and we're gonna start putting credits up and mentioning the people that give to the Patreon account. You can give in any amount that you want, and so we encourage you to do that just by visit. I'll tell you what, I don't know exactly how we're going to make it public, so go to our Facebook Trinity Radio page, or go to the Trinity Radio Primetime Discussion Facebook group.
Join if you're not.
And join that if you're not yet joined. And if nothing else, we'll link it on my website, braxtonhunter.com. So just go to braxtonhunter.com, click on the Trinity Radio tab or something, and we'll have it there in an obvious way. we really would appreciate it. What we want to do is we're not going to get rich off of this. What we want to do first and foremost.
But if you want to send enough money that we do, we'll take it.
I mean, I'm not saying, honestly, I'm not saying we're never going to pocket some money out of this. But what we primarily want to do with this money is to update our set, get some better equipment, and better cameras, stuff like that, and even promote the show a little bit online so that more people can know about it and so that the gospel can be preached in a much wider way to a type of audience that doesn't necessarily get it in the conventional ways. Anything you want to add to that, Dr. Pritchett?
Help.
As always, visit us at TrinitySem.edu and talk to us about becoming a student at Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary.
Best seminary in the world.
I think so, and you can learn from great people like Dr. Jonathan Pritchett,
Dr. Steve Gregg,
Dr. Leighton Flowers,
Dr. Braxton Hunter,
Dr.
Chatham,
Ingrid Buckweiler,
Dr.
Chatham, who? Daphne White, Rob Ely, everybody. So there's all kinds of people you can learn from. Some Calvinists,
yes, some not,
some egalitarians,
some not,
some young earthers,
some not.
It's just crazy. All the conservative evangelical positions, well, I don't know if they're all represented, but a lot of those positions are there. We're a non-denominational school. We are committed to fundamental truths that we will not equivocate on, and so you can trust that what you're getting is a conservative theological education.
Amen.
Please come and talk to us at TrinitySem.edu. But if you want to learn informally, shame on you, but we have a venue for that too. You can audit classes, or you can, again, visit us at braxtonhunter.com or keep watching these YouTube videos.
We also want you to check out our sister podcast, Soteriology 101, The Bible Brodown, and The Narrow Path.
Yep, and you can do that by visiting the Trinity Commission group over there on Facebook. I forgot what they call that. The one that's it's kind of a blue site in gray. Facebook, I think that. Sure, it's not MySpace. I don't know. All right, we'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.
Honey.